Study Arata. Do you know what is one of the greatest fears of students across the world? Taking an oral exam. Oral exams are very scary, whether you are answering to your teacher on your own, or even worse, in front of all your colleagues. The fear of speaking in front of other people is very common. Fear of public speaking can be even greater than the fear of death. Now, imagine having to speak publicly and on top of that be assessed on it in an oral exam. That is why in today's conversation we're going to be looking at what can you do to overcome your fear and prepare better when you're studying for an oral exam. But just before we get started, let me be very clear straight away that there is no magic trick, there is no hack that can give you a good result if you haven't done your preparation beforehand. It is almost impossible to get a good grade in any assessment without studying. So that's the first thing that you need to realize, that the only way to do well in an oral exam is to study, to prepare. What we're going to look at today here is how to prepare in the best possible way. And the first step is to understand the importance of how you study. How you study is almost as important as what you are studying. When you're preparing for an oral exam, there are two levels that you need to take into account. One level is content. The other is how that content is going to be used. See, when you have to go through an oral exam, you need to think, you need to plan before opening your mouth and beginning to speak. If you've already studied the content, the knowledge and the information are already there in your head. What you need to do now is to pass on that knowledge to the examiner verbally, orally. And to do that, you need to plan your introduction. How you're going to make your different points. Give the different chunks of information in the correct order, using the right words, the right examples, and how to draw your conclusion. If you don't plan how you're going to get the content you know across, there's a strong chance that you won't be clearly understood. You might start to stumble over your words or repeat things that are already clear. Maybe you will discuss concepts in the wrong order. And the sequence your argument follows is very important to ensure that you make yourself understood. Maybe you will forget to mention important aspects that are crucial to reaching your conclusion. So what we're looking for here in any kind of situation of communication is to always attain the highest level of clarity that you can possibly do. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't use difficult jargon in a bid to impress. The clearer your idea is, the higher your communication will be rated. Anyone looking to share valuable ideas will not be hiding behind complicated, difficult words. And that clarity should also come across in the way you articulate your words and you use your voice. There is no need to speak fast, swallowing up your words. Just be clear and keep calm. In an oral exam, calm is perceived by the examiners as an extra indication that you really know what you're talking about. Appearance matters when you are in a situation when you are presenting. And when you start to speak slowly and calmly, you already stand out from the other students. This tiny difference can be decisive in oral exams and also in interviews when only the best applicants make the cut. Your examiner could be probably assessing dozens, perhaps even hundreds of other people. The examiner is probably tired, so it is your duty to make the examiner's job easier. So the first point is to pay extra attention to the way you talk, the way you pass on your knowledge orally. The clearer you are, the better. And the way you get that clarity is through practice. Practice until you get good at it. There is a concept that I explain in our course, How to Learn Faster, which is a little bit like this. Truly mastering the content is one thing, but being under the illusion of mastering the content is a completely different thing. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of clarity on the difference between knowing something and just thinking that we know it, the illusion of knowing. Here's a good example. You go try to sing a song at a karaoke and you choose a song that you like. a song that you've listened to hundreds of times before. Maybe you even sang it in a shower, perhaps. The trouble is that once you get the mic and you start singing, then you realize that you actually don't know the lyrics. You have no idea how to sing certain parts of that song. That surprise uncovers the difference between knowing how to sing, and thinking that you know how to sing. And similarly, you might also think that you know how to answer your exam, or perhaps you really know how to give the right answers. To really know how to answer in an oral exam, you need to practice what you know and how you know it. First of all, you need to study the subject, just like you would for a written exam, and then you need to practice speaking. Think about possible questions that the examiner might be asking you and start to answer them orally. You can do this alone, or you can practice with someone else, for example, a friend, a classmate, a relative. It is also a good idea to film your practice with your phone, and this way you can look back at the footage and identify the points that you need to improve. The more you practice, the better. For you to deliver an easy performance, the training will have to be difficult. With deliberate practice, you will uncover the weaknesses and also the gaps in your knowledge. It is important to be aware of the points on which you need to be improving always. And one of these points is probably using the right words. Use precise terminology. Now let's look at this in more detail. Any mastery of knowledge implies a certain set of technical terms, which are crucial for the professionals to be successfully communicating ideas. They also including the students of that particular field. During your oral exam, the questions will contain certain technical terms that you need to respond to. So, when you answer, you need to use all the technical terms in a precise way. If you avoid using the technical terminology in your answer, you might give the impression that you're not very secure in your knowledge. But when you use the technical terms correctly, you're showing that you really understood what is being asked. For instance, in a medical oral exam, it is much better off to say that ghrelin is a peptide hormone that is produced by the cells in the gastrointestinal tract, which regulate the appetite. That's going to give you a much better grade than saying something like, yeah, you see, we all have inside our bodies this substance that ends hunger by telling the brain that we are okay, we can stop eating. You might say that my second example was more clear. And actually, yes, the second reply is more clear when I'm talking to people outside of the medical field. They can even use it as part of the Feynman technique that you already saw here. Anyone can understand my second example, but my first example is also clear. It is also more precise when my audience is composed by medical professors in the context of the oral exam. So it is important to know who your audience is when you're communicating. And in the case of the oral exam, in your first year at university, the vocabulary that you're going to use is going to be quite different from an oral exam as a postgrad. The worst is when you try to use a technical term inappropriately. To avoid this, it is essential that you set aside some time during your preparation to understand the correct usage of the technical terminology. To answer clearly, clarify the question. Just as you need to be clear when you answer in an oral exam, you also need to be sure that you understand the question clearly. That is why you shouldn't be afraid to ask your panel of examiners the questions that you need to make sure that you're answering the correct question. See, in case you're not completely sure about what it is that they are asking you, what is the question, you can say something like, oh, excuse me, regarding the question about blah, 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 could you please clarify to me in which context? A, blah, 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 or B, blah, 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 would you like me to answer? Another handy, generic way of asking this would be, see, I like that topic so much. I believe I've got different arguments to discuss here with you. To be sure I'm approaching this in the right way, can you please rephrase the question? And you can also rephrase the question yourself and say, I want to be sure that I will be answering your question properly. Can you please confirm to me that when you asked me about blah, 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 you want me to be answering in relation to yada yada yada. When you clarify a question like this, you're doing yourself a job to put yourself in the shoes of the examiner just for a minute. And that's exactly the point of our last tip. Put yourself in the examiner's shoes, in the other student's shoes. When you are preparing for an oral exam, one of the best things that you can do is to be watching other oral exams, paying attention to the dynamics of the questions and the answers that are being exchanged between the teachers and students. This will allow you to understand what counts as a good practice and also what you should avoid. You can do this in person, or you can search for video recordings of some oral exams. And when you find this, try to put yourself in the examiner's shoes. What would you be hoping to get out of that student? How would you be phrasing your questions? What criteria would you use to assess that student in a fair way? Then, later, try to put yourself in the student's shoes. Imagine that you are that student answering to that particular question. How would you try to meet the expectations of those assessors? How would you speak to ensure that you're conveying your ideas in the best, clearest possible way? What topics would you need to study to master the content of what is being covered? The more you practice this exercise of putting yourself in the shoes of other people, be it the examiners or other students, the easier it will be for you to achieve a good grade in your oral exam. Knowing how to study for an oral exam is something that very few students excel at. And it is not enough to have mastered your subject, you also need to pass on that knowledge orally as clearly as possible. And to do that, you need to prepare well. You need to structure the best way to answer the questions in your head beforehand. And then you need to practice until you get good at it, preferably by recording your trials to identify areas in which you need to improve, such as the use of precise terminology. On the day of the oral exam, remember to clarify the exact question that you are replying to. Put yourself in the shoes of the teachers, of other students. Observe what is the best practice and also what you need to avoid. These are just a few quick tips on learning how to learn. If you stayed here till this point in our conversation, I'd like to point you to the direction of our course, How to Learn Faster. This course will teach you the more advanced techniques to do better, not only in oral exams, but also in written exams, entrance exams, and even when you're looking for a better job or you want to take your professional career to the next level. To find more about how to learn faster, you can go and visit arata.se/how to learn.